Good morning. Welcome to Just Listen, hosted by George, live podcast. Today is January 19th, 2026, and it is also Martin Luther King Day, federal holiday in the United States. So have fun today if you have events planned. Today, I want to talk about, as usual, my three segments. I'm talking about if I were running for governor of Illinois, local Illinois, state, and local politics, and also to talk about what my podcast was about from this morning that I just posted. Okay, so let's start with what's going on in Illinois, and if I were running for governor, what I would do differently. Now, the last 2 weeks, I've been talking about saving money and how immigration has affected that, and why I think that there is a great opportunity for whoever's running for governor to talk about the economy, talk about the taxes, because those two things can help you get elected. And oh, by the way, we also need to look at recruiting new people to run for the legislature. Now, we don't have much time. Primaries are in March. And hopefully, after the legislature gets back into session, the people who are running for governor will get more vocal. Haven't seen any commercials or anything like that yet. So let's start with 10 things that Pritzker has done since he's become governor that's increased taxes in Illinois. All right. So the first one is the state gasoline tax was doubled. So Pritzker doubled the state's motor fuel tax from 19 cents to 38 cents per gallon to fund 45 billion to rebuild Illinois infrastructure plan. Now, that is interesting because we did have a gas tax. I've been paying it all of these years, but to go from 19 cents to 38 cents, that's pretty extreme. Now, some people would say, well, the cost of living and all this other stuff, blah, blah, blah. Okay, it shouldn't have increased that much because what I'm going to show you is we have money coming in from several sources that could be used to help pay down debt and to cover our expenses. Now, the Rebuild Illinois infrastructure plan, I am familiar with, but like I told you before, uh, a lot of times money gets allocated. The federal government allocated money as well. And this part of Illinois, Southern Illinois, the Metro East, has only started seeing money because it's an election year. Now, I live in this area. I drive on the roads, so I can tell you for sure that the roads are still pretty bad and any other infrastructure projects. The only thing that I've seen them build in the last 7 8 years is probably one or two hotels. And keep in mind that the local governments have to approve that. But one of the chains was for a hotel that the governor might be a part of. Okay. Automatic annual gas tax hikes. 2019 law indexed the gasoline tax to inflation, resulting in automatic annual increases every July 1st. Okay, so the rate has reached 48.3 cents per gallon. That's a lot. Now, I think that we could have a gas tax. I think that we need to take it down. We need to take it down because people who are going to work driving, that is a huge impact on them. And then if you're going to use the money, it should just be for fixing infrastructure. It shouldn't be used for other things. And that's one of the things that is a problem, not only in Illinois, but several states of money comes in and then whoever's in charge says, oh, I'm going to give it to such and we're going to use it for that. Increased vehicle registration fees. Annual registration fees for standard passenger vehicles were raised from $101 to $151. EV saw a more dramatic increase, jumping from roughly $17.50 per year paid biannually to $250 annually. That is a lot. And where is the track record that has worked to help the state generate money? So if that's the case, why aren't we seeing other taxes go down, like property tax? Like I said, community taxing structure would work. So when you have a property tax, that just affects people who owns property, and some people don't own property. So how would we get the taxes from them? So you can do it through a gas tax and vehicle registrations, but still you're not bringing everybody in. So that is what the problem is with our current tax structure, because the bigger the pool of people, the more likely you are to have more money. Now, there was a corporate tax cap and rule changes to increase revenue without raising the base rate. Signed legislation capping the amount of corporate net operating losses business could deduct to $100,000 per year and decouple state code from federal business incentives. Now, going after corporate tax is never a good idea. And this was a backdoor way to get them to pay more in taxes. And as you know, when you do that to corporations, they're going to look at cutting jobs, and then eventually they're going to look at moving businesses out there. Now, you can go and look in a place like Chicago, probably Springfield, and you're driving corporations out of the state. So that is a bad idea. Now, a corporate tax flat rate, they don't mind paying, but they don't want to see it increase to fund more social programs or to expand them, which has been happening in this state at record numbers. Okay, new sports betting tax. A new progressive tax on sports wagering was implemented, charging operators up to 40% based on their adjusted gross income. Okay, so that's a tax that I don't understand either. So if you are adjusting it based on their adjusted gross revenue, I don't understand why we're doing it like that. Flat rate again. Okay, so if you, no matter how much money you win, you give a percentage of it. Why is it more? And if this is true, and this was in the 2025 and 26 budget that passed, why is it that the property taxes for the people in Chicago just doubled? So it doesn't make sense that you're increasing everything and yet you're not seeing any change in some of the other core taxes like property taxes and sales tax and things of that nature. It keeps going up. Why is it still going up? Tobacco and vape tax increases. Every state I've been in, I was in the military, tobacco is a tax that you look at. They call it like a sin tax. So from 36 to 4% in 2025. Okay, so we see it in two areas, right? Vehicles and tobacco. Okay, so and the gas tax. So if that's true, how come the other taxes didn't come down? If you're generating more revenue from these three sources, why is it that the property taxes, sale tax keep going up too? So, how much money do we have to have before people start questioning and voting for someone like the governor and the legislature that just keep raising different taxes, and there's no balance of, if you're doing personal taxes like this, why is it that the staples are still the same? All right. Parking garage tax. A new statewide tax was established for parking in commercial garages ranging from 6% to 9%. Okay, so there they go again. And if I were running for governor, I would get rid of the parking garage tax. What do you need it for? You've got all of these other taxes. Now, in some of the other states, they do these types of taxes to go after people who aren't paying taxes. Now, if you want to do that, you've got to make it taxes on things that everybody in the state uses. So, for example, it would be like groceries. Although some of the people don't pay that either, so it really has to be something that you can get more people who are actually paying these taxes, and groceries would be a good one. That's why some of the local governments have done that. All right. Real estate transfer hike. The state doubled the real estate transfer tax on non-residential properties from 56 to $1 per $500 in value. Okay, so here we go again with working class people getting taxed even more. Then we have the telecommunications surcharge increase effective July 1st. The surcharge on intrastate telecommunications rose from 7 to 8% to fund the statewide 988 suicide and life crisis lifeline. Okay, now, do we know for sure that that's where the money's been used for? This seems like a good fund uh, to put money towards, but only if. And so, if I were running for governor, there has to be audits to make sure that the money that's coming in is used for the right things. And I would tell you that a lot of this money is being redirected in other areas, especially in immigration. So we looked at these, and if I'm running for governor, these have to be fair for everyone in Illinois, because if you're working, you're paying property taxes, you're paying the income tax, and then you're paying the state gasoline tax. Then you're paying an additional automatic annual gas tax. Then you're paying for increased vehicle registration fees. Then you're paying corporate tax, which isn't everybody, but corporations, once you get over a certain percentage of that, they are looking at either downsizing, which means people are going to be put out of work. And then if the tax rate is too high, they're looking at leaving the state. And then, of course, we got the new ones in sports betting, which we don't know yet how much that is going to generate and where the money is going to be used for. Now, let's talk about the lottery. Now, I mentioned before that I'm curious why we have huge payouts, over $1 billion. There was 3 or 4 of them last year, to where the money's going for. Okay, so we split the lottery There's a semi-regional statewide lottery, and then there's the internal lottery. So those are two different things. So I am talking about the Illinois lottery. So it's the state's eighth largest revenue source. Okay, so here we go again. So if I'm running for governor, I need to audit these and see if the money's actually going to the school fund, because the first one says common school fund. Approximately 99% of lottery proceeds after prizes and expenses goes to support kindergarten through 12th grade in public education. Okay, so how much money is it? It's in the millions. We know that. And it's statewide and it's for all of the schools. Now, you're telling me that in the last 8 years with this program, that the taxpayers can't get a break on the property taxes. As I've told you, Illinois has the second or third highest property taxes in the United States. So with us bringing in lottery revenue, they could have at least gotten a couple $100 break in the meantime. So if I'm running for governor, whoever's running, they have to pledge that they're going to audit this and then look at decreasing the property taxes, since they are generating revenue for the schools from the lottery, and then show the people of Illinois the difference and then make it fair. So whoever's running for governor needs to be talking about this on the Republican side, because I cannot believe that most people want to have lots of revenue coming in and then still have the state taxes and the the um, property taxes still as high as they are. Anybody running for governor on the Republican side should win by a landslide. Okay, now we have specialty causes that it goes to too. So a small portion of the revenue, Alzheimer's research, Special Olympics Illinois, multiple sclerosis, veterans assistance, and breast cancer research. Okay, I think that those are great causes. I see no reason to not give to these causes. The only thing I would say is maybe do a rotation where other causes can get some visibility and get some money as well. Okay, but the school fund needs to be scrutinized, because taxpayers need some breaks on something. And like I said, the only way to get rid of the personal income tax is to amend the state constitution, which I think that we could do, but you have to do it in phases. And if I'm running for governor, you have to lay out a clear, concise plan so that we can include community in the taxation. Okay, capital fund projects. Any surplus revenue in excess of amount required for the common school fund may be transferred here. Okay, so there needs to be more discussion about that, because here we go again. Because if there is a surplus of money, why hasn't it been used for the schools? Okay, and that's why we need audits. That's probably the number one thing someone running for governor needs to tell people that they're going to do. Where is the money going? We're generating lots of revenue, but where is it going? Okay, so next is the cannabis. Same flavor as the other one, generally speaking. 35% of the general revenue fund from cannabis goes to help address the state pension crisis. So that's 35% of the cannabis, which I think that that's good. Then we have 25% to restore, reinvest, renew program provides grants to communities historically impacted by economic disinvestment and violence. Okay, so this one needs to be scrutinized a little bit more. I'm not quite sure on why that's something that can't be done by the private sector. So if I'm running for governor, we want to help. We've got a lot of social programs and we need to start looking at them. And we can uh, do grants, but maybe they should be privately done for things like this because we need to look at the health of the state and what people are paying in taxes. 20% to the Department of Human Services, allocated for mental health, substance abuse treatment, and prevention. I'd even say we probably need more in that one than we do in the restore, reinvest, and renew programs. Again, I'm not sure how that's given us any value, but allocating for mental health, that is a good thing. 10% to the budget stabilization fund. Okay, so the state currently has a rainy fund used for paying down unpaid bills. Okay, I would get rid of that. This can be covered in the budget. We don't need to earmark money for that. And I would tell you that if they're doing that, they're not using the money for the right thing. So as governor, I would just get rid of that one. 8% to the local government distributed fund shared with local municipalities for crime prevention and law enforcement training. I would give it all to law enforcement training. Those guys need training and they want it. So, crime prevention, not sure what they mean by that. It's 8%, but that 8% for law enforcement training, law enforcement would appreciate that. All right, 2% for drug treatment fund used for public education and research on the health impacts of cannabis. I would get rid of that. There is no reason why we need to use taxpayer dollars to fund uh, research. That can be done privately. So that's where your money's going now. So if you're voting in the primaries, this is where we're at, and this is where the money's going that you are paying taxes on. And even if you're being targeted, if you're in the cannabis arena, you should be concerned about this too, because wouldn't it be great if it went more towards uh, the state's pension funds? Maybe 50% of it should go there. Then that way, the money coming from these other sources, like I keep promoting here, of the uh, state income tax and the property tax could be lessened because that's the goal. The goal is to have less taxes coming out of that because we don't include the whole state. Then we got alcohol and liquor revenues. So 50%, 57% of all liquor revenue supports the overall state budget. Okay. And then 43% of it goes towards statewide infrastructure and construction projects. Okay. So that's a little bit redundant. So I'm saying all this to say that these points need to be talked about in a debate because the governor and the legislature control the distribution of funds. And I am saying that these can be done better. Allocation needs to go towards saving taxpayers money And I do not believe that that's what's being done now. Okay, so we've gone through this portion. So again, if I'm running for governor and share this with the people running for governor, they should be talking about these issues non-stop. And when we pivot to the what's going on in the legislature, this is what's going on in the legislature. We've got, and I've given you three examples of revenue coming in that they have percentage wise dispersed to some areas that I think should be pulled back on, that we could use grant money. People in Illinois, Illinoisans are very generous with their money. They will give to causes. They are given to causes, and to use state money to fund some of these doesn't make sense. And whoever's running for governor needs to request these audits. We need audits to really know where the money is going. And the legislature can control that too. And like I've told you previously, this is where the action is. We need to replace a lot of these Democrats with Republicans so that we can get some fiscal restraint on where we're spending the money at. So tomorrow, finally, the Illinois legislature meets, and I told you what they are focused on. And living in Southern Illinois, we need to be paying attention because it is going to affect us definitely. Because I predict that we're going to be paying more taxes, and that's going to come really soon, probably as early as April or May. Once we get through the primaries, you're going to see the legislature and the governor start saying, hey, well, why don't we bring in more money by, and then they're going to start listing the things that they're going to do. Now, on the Republican side, we have to counter with what I've been talking about the last 25 minutes and say, hey, Illinoisans, do you want to pay more in taxes? Because you sure are if you put the same governor and same legislature with this super Democratic majority back for January of 2027. All right. So let me talk about what I was talking about with the federal government policy, which this week I was talking about on states' voting laws. So just high level here. So what the federal government is trying to do is look at who is voting. This isn't a new issue in the country. Remember, from 10 years ago, 15 years ago, in some states, they wanted people to show IDs. And that went all the way up to the Supreme Court. Now, what they're trying to do is verify who is on the voter rolls. Now, did you know that locally, if you are not, if you are a immigrant who's in the country illegally, in some states, you can vote in local elections. Why is that important? It's important because when people get elected with this help, they can bring in federal and state money to the local governments to disperse to the people who voted them in, and they could be undocumented people that you have voting. Now, in Illinois, I think that that is a problem. Go and look at this last election for mayor. of Chicago. And if they did some checking, and it's hard to check because when you go and vote, if you have a license, if you have a residence, they haven't been checking deeper than that. And the federal government cannot get in there because they've made it so complicated at the local level, it's hard to check the facts and the details. So that's why voting in local elections, which some of the states are allowing undocumented people and 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 others, because if you are documented, you cannot vote in the federal election. Although in some states you can still vote in the state elections. So we've made it pretty complicated. The bottom line is when you vote the local elections, you are putting people in office that agree with your views that will get you money. And in Illinois, if you look at Chicago, like I stated previously, that seems to be the case based on some of the facts and the data that the city council of Chicago keeps voting to fund more undocumented people since they are a sanctuary city, as opposed to funding things that have helped the low income people in the area. So all I had to do is watch the videos to see that. And the big picture is this is going to continue unless we make a huge change at the top. So this is Just Listen Live, and I am George, and I'll be back Wednesday. Have a great morning and stay warm. All right, I found it finally. Sorry for the delay like that.